Welcome, everybody. This is Donna D, aka the Urban Mommy, and I am back with another podcast. Today, I am joined by Ms. Laurie A. Couture, and she is a licensed mental health counselor. So, this is another one of those podcasts where we may have some trigger warnings because we are going to be discussing a lot of different things that may be triggering for some. But we do have a mental health professional with us, and she is going to talk to us and let us know how to deal with a lot of these issues that we do have. Laurie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. It's nice to finally get to hang out with you and chat.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so can you tell the viewers and our listeners who you are? Who is Laurie A. Couture?
Yes, hi. I'm the author of Instead of Medicating and Punishing and Nurturing and Empowering Our Sons. Nurturing and Empowering Our Sons just came out this year. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I have over 2 decades of experience working with children, youths, and families in the mental health field, in social services, in education and juvenile justice, and also as a consultant. Currently, what I do now is I run a consulting business where I work with industries and programs and agencies that work with children, youths, and families, and I help them make sure their services are more trauma competent. So I do research reports, I do consulting, I do speaking and workshops for these programs. And I felt that I could reach a larger audience and help more families by training the agencies with basically my protocol called the Couture Protocol.
Okay.
Um,
Can you actually tell us what the couture? I have a bunch of questions, but I'm going to jump around a little bit. Can you tell us what the couture protocol is?
Yes, it's something I developed over just the years of working with children, youths, and families. It's a 12-dimensional holistic system of working with a child, the family members, and the generational trauma. So instead of a child just going into therapy and going in and doing talk therapy with a therapist and maybe getting prescribed medication, and then that child still being put back into those systems like school that are not helpful to them, we work with all aspects of that child's development, their emotional development, their physical needs, their psychological and mental needs, their cognitive learning, creative needs, their social needs, sexual issues that they may have, and spiritual needs. And then we also address the generational trauma. So we work with the whole child. And that's why I really want to move the Couture protocol forward. I'm working on the clinical manual now, and I teach parts of it to different agencies, like I said. So my hope is to have it be a certification program that other therapists can be trained in, and then they will then eventually be able to train others in doing this, because I feel that it is going to be far more relevant to the needs of children and families than the current system, which just doesn't work.
Definitely agree with that. So when we're talking about young kids and going to therapy and sometimes getting medication, sometimes the kids probably really do need medication, and sometimes the kids are a little unruly, if that makes sense. My
Yes.
question is, how can you tell the difference between the kid that just has a behavior problem and the kid that may actually have some mental health issues going on? Or is there a difference?
Well, the way I look at it, Donna, and that's a great question, is that if a child is acting out in some way, or a child is doing something that's outside of their development, that's what I call an alarm signal from nature. Nature is giving an alarm signal that something in that child's environment is not meeting his or her needs. And so, as adults, we need to look at what needs are not being met. Children don't act out unless there is a really good reason for it. They're acting out behaviors I try to not see as behavioral problems, but as nature sending off an alarm signal. For example, a lot of boys are just immediately given the label of ADHD for simple, normal boy behavior,
Right.
behavior that is developmentally appropriate. And then they are just given these powerful chemicals that affect their bodies on every single level. These chemicals are not safe. So in some cases, ADHD symptoms are actually trauma symptoms, or a mismatched environment, an educational environment. And at other times it's just developmentally appropriate boy behavior, or a really active girl. And these kids need kinesthetic learning. They need to learn with their hands and their bodies instead of just being labeled and drugged.
Oh, that's a really good point. Now you're gonna have me going all off topic, but I'm glad you're talking about this because we have this thing where there is this thing called the prison pipeline to prison, where they talk about the
Yeah.
schools and whether
Yes.
that's bad. But we have a situation here. One of the schools here in New Orleans, my little nephew goes there, so he was telling me that when they get in trouble, it's like a team. So he said, "Oh, we're in
Mm.
trouble, so we can't have hot lunch this week. We can only have cold lunch." I was like, "What?" I was like, "What does that mean?" And he's only 10, so he's not making it
Mm.
up. I'm like, "Okay, so what happens?" He
Mm.
said, "Well, someone got in trouble for lunch." He said, "So for the rest of the week, we're having cold lunch. We'll have sandwiches, and then we don't get a PE."
Mm.
So a lot of times, I don't think. And then my daughter's school, totally different. So they give those kids two recesses. They say that the kids need to get out.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the public schools, well, let me say public, we have our charters here. A lot of those schools, they punish kids by taking away their recess, their PE time. How, I mean, from a mental health professional, what is the long term effects or short term effects of doing that?
First of all, I'm just so sorry that your nephew is having to go through that. It's just heartbreaking to me to punish a child by saying you're not going to have nourishing food that will nurture you, by a hot meal, or we're going to take away the very thing that you need developmentally, which is movement. The very fact that the children are getting in trouble is usually because they're not moving enough. They're being made to sit in chairs all day and either do paperwork or tap on tablets. And so to take away the physical education in the recess is actually like taking away water from a dehydrated desert traveler. It's mind-boggling, and it's completely counterintuitive. If the child is acting out, well, he needs more recess, not less. He needs more physical education. In fact, 80% of the school day should be movement outdoors,
Mm,
you know?
okay. I have
So that's
another
how I feel about
situation.
that.
I appreciate that, and I wish I would have seen you, met you sooner. So I have another
Oh,
situation, same, not the same kid, same type of situation. This poor child was diagnosed from maybe age 8, and it started with ADHD. Then they gave him bipolar. They said he had personality disorder,
oh, God.
oppositional defiance disorder, and
Yeah,
I know this because I looked at
yeah.
the book that he had, that they gave him with everything that was going on. Of course, he was on all kind of medication. He was on the ADHD medicine. Then he had to get on something to sleep at night. Then he had to get on something to give him an appetite because, and this is at 9 years old. Long story short, this young boy is now 21, 22. I went with him to the doctor, and the doctor actually thinks after all this time that he's actually on the spectrum. So all that time they were treating this child like he was just a behavior problem. And is we so quickly to medicate. And I'm not against medication because I have ADHD myself, so I do take medication, so I'm not against it. But I just think that sometimes we have to go the extra step. Do you see a lot of misdiagnosis with the kids?
Absolutely. I would say the majority of it is a misdiagnosis. I mean, in what you just described for this now young man, for when he was little, this is a very typical situation that I have seen hundreds and hundreds of times, where the child is brought into therapy for this ADHD, which a lot of times it's just normal behavior, that the
Mm-hmm.
child just can't sit still all day because that's not what children are made to do.
Right.
And then what happens is the side effects of that medication then lead to other additional symptoms that are then misdiagnosed as like you said, bipolar disorder or a behavioral disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. And then they're put on multiple meds for bedwetting, sleep issues, like you said, the appetite. And by the time they get to be in their early 20s, their systems are so damaged. And like you said, now they're finding out that actually all this time he was on the autism spectrum and being punished by chemicals, chemical child abuse. And what I want to say is that ADHD, I believe, is a fraudulent diagnosis. It is the symptoms are real, Donna,
Mm-hmm.
but the symptoms are usually a collection of trauma symptoms, or they can also be medical symptoms such as food intolerances, food sensitivities, neurological issues like the spectrum. They can also be symptoms of just the fact that somebody is a kinesthetic learner and they are just not meant by God and by nature to be sitting in a chair and they need to be go, 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 go. I'm one of those people. I need to be moving. There's also a condition called left brain, right brain incoordination, where one side of the brain cannot perceive the other side unless the body keeps moving.
Mm.
And then there are sensory integration and sensory processing disorders where that can affect the ability to concentrate, focus, and sit still. And so that can be treated with sensory integration, PT and OT. So the fact that you're on a medication, there's no judgment about that. But my guess is just based on the fact that you're probably in my age group or somewhere around there, is that they just gave this diagnosis as a blanket without looking at really what are your needs, what is your trauma history, what is your sensory integration profile, do you have any food sensitivities, a full medical workup. They don't do that with people. It's just,
No.
oh yeah, you meet this set criteria, yeah, you got ADHD, here's a med. And so unfortunately what that does is if there is a medical problem, then you know it can actually worsen over time, especially in children. So I'm heartbroken to hear this this young man has gone through this, but unfortunately, it's a very common scenario that I've heard.
That's horrible. Yes. The mental health that we have here in New Orleans is really, it's really not, it's not good at all, especially for children. There is not many things, many resources that we can use. And that particular person that I'm telling you about, he is now over 18. And now we're seeing that he really cannot do anything. So, and it's hard because now we have to go back and try to get the things that we should have gotten before he was 18, but because he was kind of running all over the place, and he
Yeah.
would never get in trouble for bad stuff. It would always be foolish things that he would do. And that's how he got all those different conditions. But that's something that I'm working with now, especially knowing that he's possibly autistic. Now a lot of stuff is starting to make sense. And we were thinking that he didn't understand or that he just wasn't listening. It wasn't that he wasn't listening. He just didn't understand. And in his head, he made it to mean something, and if we tell him something and it doesn't mean what he think it means in his head.
Yes. Yeah. Now, one of the things that I would recommend, since he is over 18, is your state should have a vocational rehabilitation. It's part of the Department of Education. Every state has a vocational rehabilitation. And what they do, they work with all ages, but they're especially attuned to young people. And what they would do is they would find out his strengths and his challenges and ask him what his career aspirations are, if he has any, and
Okay.
help him get the services he needs to be successful in a particular field that might interest him.
Okay.
And they would get him the training for that. I highly recommend Voc Rehab. And if you don't like the Voc Rehab counselor, that he ends up with, go ask for another one.
Okay.
It's another thing would be to still try to get the sensory integration services because you're never too old to get the sensory treatment.
Sensory
Um,
integrate, and that would be like I can ask a PCP or his mental health doctor. Sensory
Well,
integration.
they may not know anything about that. You might have to research that on your own, is find
Okay,
out who does sensory integration or sensory processing therapies and just do a Google search for it.
gotcha. Okay,
In
sensory
New Orleans.
integration processing. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
so
write that
it
down.
might be under sensory integration therapy or sensory processing disorder therapy. And it would be like a PTOT thing, but it's a specialized PTOT that's specific to sensory. And what they would do is they would do a sensory evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would come up with these fun activities. The kids usually find them fun. They could be something like riding scooters. There's a treatment called ball of Vissix where you switch left brain, right brain, cross over the midline, and that can really help recalibrate the brain. These types of treatments, and they're completely non-invasive, and a lot of times they're fun.
Okay.
Sometimes they can include swinging, being swung in a swing, some type of brushing, skin brushing, a certain type of brush that feels good to that person. They can be deep pressure massages on the joints. So sensory integration treatment can really calm a lot of that down.
Okay.
Now, one thing that's just important is a lot of times the spectrum, people on the spectrum, it does run in families a lot of times. So
Mm-hmm.
if he has siblings or parents that may have some of the same symptoms, it could be that there are other family members that are also on the spectrum that may have been also given it, especially older people have not been given a lot of, they've been diagnosed with bipolar, but they're on the spectrum.
Right. Yeah, they get that a lot because they have that social aspect where they don't know how to
Yeah.
socially connect with others. So people think they're bipolar because they're
Or they'll
standoffish.
exactly, and they have tantrums. And one big feature of autism spectrum disorder, if it's been untreated, is tantrums, and those can last into adulthood if somebody doesn't know what's going on and can't help that person with the sensory and the social issues. Because if the person becomes overstimulated and they don't know how to cope, well, then they can have a meltdown, and
Hmm.
that can look like bipolar.
Yes, the same kid I was telling you about. He almost was arrested at school because he was
Oh,
having like a meltdown. But
yeah.
he walks around and all he does is walk around. So that he's like, I have to leave. That's what he'll say. He'll leave and he'll walk out. And he left the school and they're telling him, come back. And he's like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna walk. So I had to come to the school and I said, listen. So I had to explain to him. I'm like, look, he is. You may not see it because if you look at him, you wouldn't be able to tell. But knowing him, that he does have some type of issues going on. So I had to let them know. And the guy, he was very apologetic because he said, I'm so sorry. He said, I never thought, that he needed any kind of special help. But that's a lot of times kids are misjudged.
Yeah. Yes, and there's just the fact that one of the things that helped calm him down was to go for a walk. That tells me right there that there's some sensory issues going on. He was trying to de-escalate himself. He was trying to um, calm the overstimulation, and he was trying to do a proactive thing of saying, I need to get out of this situation. And he knew that kinesthetics would help him. Another thing is that if he was having a fight, flight, or freeze reaction, and his brain and body were being flooded with stress hormones, walking and running and moving the body can actually metabolize that. So a school telling a kid not to move, or taking away their recess, or taking away their PT or PE, or saying come back in and sit down, it's the worst thing you could do in that situation.
Wow. And you would think that most of this stuff is common sense, but it's not
Yeah,
being practiced in the
no,
schools at all.
no.
Like
They
we're
have
trying
a
to teach them how to be
punishment
soldiers.
base. Yeah, it's almost like they want to punish kids instead of find out what is that the root of this child's behavior? Why is this child acting this way? Well, we need to find out the roots, because you know why? We're the adults. That's our job. And if the child is in distress, well, nature is giving us alarm signals, and it's our job to figure it out.
No, that's right. Okay. So as a parent, let's say a parent has a child who is very, very active, what some doctors would say ADHD. I think it's something else. They don't say ADHD anymore, but they would say, "Oh, I think we need to put him on medication or something like that." What things should a parent consider before she decides if she wants to go the medication route or if she wants to stick it out?
Well, what I would recommend is if there is any possibility of changing the child's educational environment, I would go that route first. So if you can homeschool, and I'm telling you, I was able to homeschool my son as a single working parent on almost income that looked impossible to live on. I did it because I didn't want my son drugged and medicated and labeled. There are, like you said, Donna, charter schools that you could try, with your free education, try to get into a better charter school or possibly a child-centered private school on a scholarship. There are ways that you can look. There is online schooling. There are a plethora of activities out there, ways that you can get around it. In my second book, Nurturing and Empowering Our Sons, I'm backwards here. There is a whole chapter on all the different educational alternatives, and I give them a nature's intent grade, A to F. And so that's the first thing, is you want to make sure if your child's sitting down in a chair all day at school and then having to, oh my gosh, do homework at the end of the day, first of all, try to mitigate that situation. Then you want to find out if they do have any sensory integration issues. Is it a food allergy? Are they eating sugar? Are they eating grains, dairy, soy? Those things can be some children can be sensitive to those things, so to those ingredients. Another thing you may want to look at is, are there any traumas going on, any stressors, bullying, problems at home? Are there things that can be fixed with that? So you want to try to get to the root of where those alarm signals are coming from. Another thing you can do is go to a holistic health provider instead of going to a psychiatrist or a doctor who's just going to give medication.
Mm-hmm.
The key is trying to find another way so that you don't have to put chemicals in the child's body, because what an adult can handle, even an older adolescent. We do know that there's black box warnings on certain medications for children 24 and under, can cause suicidal and homicidal ideation. Some of these medications, like the ones they give for anxiety, the ones they give for depression, and medications for mood, or basically behavioral issues.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you actually specialize in healing developmental trauma and attachment problems.
Yes.
So what happens like with a kid whose parents left them or they were abandoned?
Well, a lot happens with a situation like that. So now, can our audience see us, or is it just you and I can see
They
each
can
other?
see. They can
Okay,
see.
they can. Can I draw something out for you?
Yes, of course.
I'm going to show you something that's in my book. It'll be a little easier to understand what happens to that child. So
Okay.
just give me 1 second here. I'm just going to draw a 4-point circle here. And you like to use a lot of colors, so I'm going to grab another marker here. Okay, so what we're looking at here is, it's a little backwards, but what we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at is the mammal attachment cycle. And how this works, and again, this is for all mammals, not just humans, but we're going to focus on people. So child has a need, child expresses the need, and I'm sorry because I'm going on mirror feature here, so this is the only place that we can intervene as parents. Parent meets need with sensitivity, and then child feels homeostasis, or a sense that all systems feel good. And what those feelings become: joy, trust, relief, a sense of safety. And then what that becomes is secure attachment. And when
Mm.
a child feels secure attachment, that's sort of like a way of saying bonded. And that affects all of their future relationships. But what happens in a situation like what you just described, where a child's needs are not met, and that's on a very extreme level with abandonment,
Mm.
child has a need, child expresses the need, parent does not meet the need, delays, denies, or somehow fails to meet it. And then instead of feeling homeostasis, the child feels intense distress,
Mm.
mistrust, anger, rage, pain, depression, anxiety. And what that causes is not secure attachment, but what's called disrupted or insecure attachment. So
Mm.
in the child who is abandoned, that creates what I would call like an attachment break, completely severs the attachment. So you're going to be expecting a child like that to be showing a lot of behaviors. They may show aggression, depression, anxiety, behavioral addiction or chemical addictions eventually, acting out, oppositionality, refusal to cooperate, because they have to push people away. You're going to see a lot of hyperkinetic behavior or what they call hyperactivity. You're going to see a lot of self-soothing behaviors, and a lot of that can become addicted, or
Right.
kids just checking out and being on, playing video games all day. So that child is showing you through his or her behavior that he is damaged, that he's been wounded, that he has attachment breaks and he has trauma. And so what we need to do to heal that is we've got to target that trauma and we've got to get back on this cycle again. But the most important thing is that child needs to have ideally, if they're in foster care, they need to have an adoptive family or a permanent caretaker that is ironclad, dedicated, and committed to that child in order for that healing process to start. Now, Donna, I did a type of treatment and I highly recommend it. It's called EMDR. And what that stands for is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And you can just call it EMDR because that's how it's very well known that way. And it is a special type of trauma therapy that gets at the limbic system, which is kind of if you were to drill your fingers through all the way through your ears, it reaches a little organ called our amygdala.
Mm-hmm.
And the amygdala is our fight, flight, or freeze center that gets
Mm.
turbocharged when we suffer trauma. And what happens is then the amygdala is like a sentry that's like, what? And it's all over the place. And it sees a threat in everything. So a traumatized child is going to see a threat in everything. And that's why you see the pushback, the acting out behavior that don't tell me what to do. I'm not going to cooperate with you, because they're never going to let anybody back to their heart unless they know that that person's dedicated to them and they have the treatment. So EMDR can be the first step to heal the trauma, and then attachment work can help bring the new family back on this cycle, back so it's secure again. It's amazing what nature has given us. If we just get back on this cycle again, the child can start healing. But the
Okay.
problem is most mental health professionals aren't aware of this. And what they would do with that child is say, well, yeah, let's sit here and talk about his feelings for the next 5 years while we medicate him, you know?
Okay. So when we're here, we have a lot of juvenile crime right now. Actually, it's the whole U.S. is dealing with it, where
Yeah.
the age of the criminals as well as the age of the victims are really low. They
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
they are youth. So I know we can't put everything in one box, but if we were looking at it and we wanted to discuss crime, could we look at the insecurity that you just showed us, or is it a possibility that it was some of those untreated, those misdiagnosed issues that we spoke about a couple of minutes ago, or a
I
mixture?
would, Yeah, I would say in general, yeah, especially when children are acting out to that degree where they're engaging in criminal activity, that shows a real serious trauma history. Some major attachment issues. Usually, a parent is missing, often the dad. So they may be in the foster care system or spent some time in the foster care system. A lot of times, you'll see multi-generational trauma in their family. So their parents have gone through terrible traumas, their grandparents and their great grands. And so these children don't need punishment. These children need trauma competent care. They need their needs met because if they're engaging in crime, that's usually the biggest alarm signals. They're screaming out for help. And we can either give them that help or we can ignore it and keep punishing them. And then the crime rates are going to continue. Um, these kids will seek out gangs or other groups of kids that can give them a sense of belonging that they may not feel at home because maybe one of the parents has to work 3 jobs just to survive because there's a parent missing, or maybe that because the parent is so traumatized they just don't have the emotional capacity to give that child the nurturance that he or she needs. Um, and so we want to be able to, I worked with a lot of kids I did do some juvenile justice work, and even in mental health, I worked with a lot of kids that had committed some terrible crimes, and even committed attempted murder or, very serious, rape and grand theft auto. And in every single case, these children they needed compassion. They needed compassion more than anything else. And they were some of my most favorite clients to work with because they just soaked up adult attention so much. And they were so willing to develop empathy if somebody just gave it to them first.
Mm.
And that was the biggest thing, that if you can show them the right path and you give them some positivity and you help find all of their creative talents, a lot of times they have great talents that have never been tapped into. And if you can work with that, you will see this child blossom. But if you throw them away and lock away the key and keep traumatizing them in those environments, you're going to end up with a hardened adult middle-aged criminal eventually, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so sad, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the middle because I live in New Orleans where we do have a lot of crime, and I agree sometimes with a lot of the people that make the comments about the kids, and but I also understand the other side. I know that these
Yeah.
kids, they weren't born evil. Those kids
Yeah.
are dealing with a lot of stuff, most of them,
Yeah.
and I'm glad you also mentioned about the parents being traumatized because a lot of times we give parents a really, really hard time,
Yeah.
but sometimes they are just as traumatized and were never able
Yes.
to actually, their situation
Yes.
was never really addressed. And a
Yes.
lot of times, I'm not even a mental health professional, but just from seeing things that I have learned and witnessed myself, a lot of times when they have mental health issues, similar to what you said with autism, it runs in families. So if you have a
Yes.
kid that has all these different conditions, the parents, somebody else in that household also has a lot going on as well. So
Yes.
sometimes I feel bad for the parents because they get a really, really bad
Mm-hmm.
rep when they really are trying the best they can. It's just that sometimes the kids get out of control, but it's not just the parents, it's they have been failed on multiple levels.
Yes, and that's why with the Couture Protocol, we work on the generational trauma. We
Mm,
work on trying to help the families all heal because a lot of times you'll find this goes back sometimes 5 generations.
mm,
Um, 5 generations or more of just terrible traumas just cycling through. And so if we blame the child or we blame the parent or the grandparents, we are not helping anybody because really everybody is doing the best they can with what they have. And so what needs to happen is these families need help. They need compassion and they need assistance, and parents need to have mentors that will nurture them to teach them how to nurture their children, because you can't water a flower with an empty watering can. If the parent or the grandparent wasn't nurtured, then where is that going to come from out of the thin
right.
air? You know?
Right. Good point. There's this show on Netflix called Last Chance U, and it's a college. It's a junior college, and basically all of the boys who were like top recruits and they had like some issues. They may have gotten in trouble, may have gotten arrested, and they got put out of school, lost their scholarship. They go to this school in Mississippi called, well, it's not called Last Chance, but that's the name of the show. Basically, they go to this school and the stories are, I love it. And it's just so sad because if you're watching and you're not watching to understand, you will say, man, these kids are just wild. They
Yeah.
unruly. They don't
Yeah.
care. They're humbuggish. You would say a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff, but every single time one of those kids open their mouths and start telling a story, it's like you
Mm.
can't help but just feel sorry for them. And the people on
Mm.
that show, like in that college, they do a really good job trying to get those boys back so that they can go back into their D1 schools. So you may want to
Wow.
check that out one day. Like you said, some of your favorite
Yeah.
students were the ones that had the big issues. So that's that.
Yeah.
Also in New Orleans, we have, the issues with the juvenile crime, and it's, to be honest, it's a mess. It's so, that can be a whole nother class on its own. I had a parent, Tamika, and she was on probably an episode or two before, and I felt so sorry for her situation. She had the same thing with her daughter. The daughter actually ended up going to jail. She was 12, and this lady has 8 kids. So all of the other children, the daughter's the only one that had issues, and it's just so sad to see the things that they would do. They turned her away from the hospital for behavior issues. They say they couldn't help it. Her story
Mm.
is really, it's horrible. I'll tag you in there, but I mean, just listen to
Yeah.
her story, and it's
Please
just
do.
so sad to see that these poor children are going through this. And they actually took the kids from Orleans Parish Jail and they shipped them away to like 2 hours to Angola, which is a state
Oh.
facility. And it's like, it's a
Oh my
serious,
God.
it was one of the top 10 most dangerous jails. Now, of course, they're not going to be with them, but it's just the mere thought that I am on this penitentiary, and it's, I don't know. And I guess, like I said, I'm on the line. I feel bad for the kids because I just wish that, things could change, but we need more people like you in policy making positions
Mm.
because we have people that have no clue about what's going on.
Yeah. And it's so hard because the people they want in policies are the ones they want to keep the status quo the way it is and get tougher and on crime instead of, okay, well, we need to figure out the whys
The
of it.
why.
Instead of tough, we need, why are people doing this? Yes,
Yeah.
of course, there's opportunistic kids that just get pulled into the wrong crowd. But you know what? That's not the majority of the kids who are really struggling. I mean, yes,
Right.
like you said, Donna, like when you start listening to the stories that kids tell about their lives and you
Hmm.
listen to the families, it's so tragic and so heartbreaking. And
Yes.
I've worked with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families. I mean, I haven't counted, but I'm probably over 1,000, a few thousand, I don't know. So many. I lost count like years ago. And I have never seen a situation where people just are inherently bad. You know,
Right.
it's always that something terrible has happened in that family system and it just hasn't been addressed over time.
Oh, man. Okay, so you wrote a book. So can you tell me about the first book that you wrote and what the reason why you wrote the book is? There's a story behind it.
Sure. The first book I wrote is instead of medicating and punishing, and this book is sort of a kind of like an entry level information about sort of my what I call my nature's intent philosophy, and it basically explains like what we talked about here. Explains this in depth. The um, secure attachment cycle. I'm sorry, like turned off the phone over and over and it just keeps ringing. And it talks about how children's brains are wired by nature to expect certain conditions, basically. And unfortunately, our culture, everything we're taught about child rearing, education, and mental health is about opposite of what children actually need. We talk a lot about Paleolithic tribal societies in that book and about how Paleolithic tribal societies parented in a way that is diametrically opposed to the way industrialized cultures run, actually, ever since agriculture and civilization. So we get really into that. And most importantly, we get into the how to heal, help your children heal. In Nurturing and Empowering Our Sons, this is a huge book. I ask parents, please don't get intimidated by the size, because it is set up so that it is a quick read, little bits at a time. I have lots of headings, subheadings, everything is in full color. So even the headings are in color. So it's very easy to read little bits, a little bit every night. And what the book does is it focuses on boys, because we have a suicide epidemic of boys and young men. And we have, as you said, juvenile crime, video game addiction, boys withering and just falling apart in every dimension of their lives and in all of our society's institutions. There are hundreds and hundreds of federal and private and nonprofit programs for empowering girls and young women. There is nothing for boys and young men. And if there is something, it's again that punishment sort of philosophy. So Nurturing and Empowering Our Sons helps parents understand what our boys are facing, and then what can we do to help our sons heal? How can we remove them from systems that are harming them and find alternatives? How can we support them, protect them, and empower them so that they aren't becoming, unfortunately, in their 20s, failure to thrive. I'm sorry, failure to launch because they were failure to thrive. And if your son, is going through failure to launch, we talk about how to fix that too.
Okay. So let's see how I can put this question. So, well, for the book, for the second book, the one with Nurturing Our Sons,
Yes.
my question, I was trying to see how I could frame the question, but I know you talk about what boys need. Is there a difference racially when it comes down to what our boys need, for black boys versus white boys versus Asian boys, Hispanic, or is it pretty much the same thing?
That's a great question. No, all humans are born with the same needs. That doesn't mean that there aren't special culture and nationality and racial um, sort of needs as far as the family and the well-being and social needs, but the basic emotional, psychological, social, physiological needs are all the same for everyone. And in our I do a lot of study of peaceful tribal cultures from South America and Africa that were truly Paleolithic, hunter gatherer, and those children had needs met that if we met those same needs in the same way that they did now, regardless of race, our children would be as happy as those children were. And basically, some of the things they did differently in Paleolithic tribes were they breastfed children for no less than 2.5 years. So that's a basic biological need that is human. So just like all mammals have this secure attachment cycle, this is the same no matter what race, no matter what sex, no matter what nationality we are. We all are on this mammal attachment cycle. So, but that doesn't mean that there are not certain needs that kids have for belonging. The human need is for belonging, but each culture, each nationality deals with that different. And that's why our world is so beautiful, because every nationality and every culture and every race has different ways of showing belonging and doing ceremonies and rituals and ways of celebrating togetherness and family. And so children need to be part of that for their for in their families and in their communities. But the actual need underneath there is universal for belonging.
Okay. You brought up the epidemic that we have with boys and suicide. I know you had your situation happened in 2017. My brother
Yes.
committed suicide in 2004.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So yes, same to
Yeah.
you. I know it's a lot of
Thank you.
times, especially for younger people, that was something that we didn't think that they did or that they do. Why do you think it's starting to be a little more common now?
I think as far as boys, they are getting a message from our media incessantly, and it's been ever since I would say around the year 2000. Boys and young men are especially getting the message that being a boy is a bad thing, that it's a toxic thing. We're constantly even hearing that statement, toxic masculinity. Masculinity is not toxic.
Right.
Behavior is toxic, and females and males can both exude toxic behavior. And there is very little out there that's positive for boys. So not only are they missing having some of these needs met and they're being targeted in school as for natural boy behavior, but they're hearing incessantly in every one of our society's institutions, from school, mental health, medical, media, social services, you name it. They're hearing that, if you're a girl, that's awesome. You're empowered. Girls rule, boys rule. They've been hearing that since, for over 20 years now. And it's
Mm,
having a terrible corrosive effect to the point where now you have young men, millennials in their 30s, they can't even function as with basic adult responsibilities. They're behaving like they're children still. So yes, I see that there is something different. There is something different that's happening, that we're just not supporting our boys' mental health. We're not supporting their needs. We're not supporting them educationally and creatively. We are not doing things to help boys thrive. There used to be things like Boy Scouts and things like that, Boys Town US. Everything has been turned co-ed now. While there's still a Girl Scouts, now Boy Scouts are co-ed. So boys have no safe place just for themselves. And if there is a boys program, Donna, I found that it's that punishment. You have to be a different boy. Whereas a girls program is, let's empower you as a girl. Whereas for boys is, we have to teach you not to be toxic.
that's
Imagine that,
true.
telling children they're toxic, you know?
That is so true. When I was running into some issues with my son, and we wanted to put him into some programs like mentorship programs and stuff
Yeah.
like that. And you're absolutely right. The only programs they had were programs that was like, had he been convicted, they would be able to put him into a program. There was another program that was really good. It's called Son of a Saint. They do really, really good things in the city. The problem is only kids that don't have a father or a father figure can take part
Yeah.
in it. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I understand, but just because you have a father does not mean that they are giving you, we may have those situations where the parents are
Right.
just,
Yeah.
may, you know. So
Yeah.
I hate that they do that and keep kids away. So we did go through a program. It was the boys club, but it's not like it
Yeah.
used to be. It's not
It's
like it used
not,
to
because now it's Boys and Girls Club. And you know what? That's fine. But the problem is, where is the place that boys can be mentored by both men and women that can nurture them? And a lot of times, boys will not bring out their vulnerabilities with their female peers.
be.
They
Yeah.
have to act tough. But if you mentor them one on one, you see how sensitive they are, and they really need that one on one. In front of girls, I think they feel like they have to be tough, and unfortunately they're hearing constantly, boys are stupid, girls are smart, and so they really feel stupid in front of their female peers. And so what happens is they'll act like clowns in front, they'll you don't they'll act the way they're being told they are.
Right.
And
So
so
oh, I'm
no,
sorry.
I'm
Go
saying,
ahead.
go ahead. No, I was just saying that unfortunately I've noticed too that mentoring programs through the mental health system also tend to be extremely temporary. Let's say
Hmm.
the child has a good mentor and they're doing a really good job with that mentor, and then they said, "Oh, look, the kid's doing better. Let's cut off the services."
Yes,
Yeah,
that's literally what happened. Like I told you, my son was assigned to Boys Town.
yeah,
Basically, he got in trouble, but it wasn't enough to be criminal behavior. So
yeah,
they put them into programs so that they won't go to the criminal justice system. But his particular
yeah,
program, he got put into Boys Town. Now, the Boys Town, it was good because he really got along with that mentor. It worked really,
Yeah.
really well. Then when we got to the end of the 8 weeks, he's like, "Hey, Miss Donna, I'm calling you just to let you know your son is at the end of the program. Do you think we still need to keep him in?" I said,
Oh,
yes. I said, because I was having some issues with him, trying to get him to understand the importance of school and going to his
yeah.
classes and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. He was like, okay, yeah, because we usually cut the kids program at 8 weeks. I said, okay. He said, so do you think? I said, well, and I said no 3 different times, and he just kept asking me. So I said, you know what? Go ahead. You can just end his program. So he made his 8 weeks, but it was good while it lasted. But I really wish that there was more programs. My son does have a father, but his father is just not fatherly, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he
Completely.
can't
Yeah.
really give him what he really needs.
Yeah,
So I was
because
trying
he
to
he
reach out.
probably didn't have it. Yeah, because he
Correct.
probably didn't have it, so he doesn't have it to give. And so
Right.
exactly, yeah, that's the problem. I mentored a child from the time the child was 12 until he was 21 years old, and I ended up going through a private mentoring program to do it because they wanted to cut off his mentoring after a very short time. And he was starting to do really good because he was with my son and he was learning what it's like to function in a family system without basically all this dysfunction. And he was learning what it was like to go out in the community and how to behave and how to act. And he was doing so well. And so we ended up working out an arrangement with his family to do private mentoring until he was 21. And it was awesome. I mean, and he really learned a lot. But now, oh no, they never normally will let mentoring go that long, you
Right.
know.
All right. So I noticed that you are very adamant about standing up for children and helping kids. So what are some of the challenges you face for doing that?
Well, I've actually faced almost losing jobs. I have faced almost lost my internship when I was younger because I stood up for children in residential facilities who were being abused by the system. I have been threatened that you're not going to be able to work in this school system because I stood up for children who are actually getting abused by a person that worked at the school. I have had to leave jobs in the past. You have to do the right thing. You just have to, because the way I look at it is the children have no voice and you have to do the right thing. It's hard. It is hard because you're working against hard systems that are deeply entrenched. And remember, these systems, they're all about money. They care about money. They don't care
Yeah.
about people.
Yeah.
So when you threaten to disrupt that, they get very defensive. And so I always look at it as I'm going to stand up for the voiceless. And yeah, it's cost me a lot, but at least I can look at myself in the mirror and go to bed at night knowing that, I did the best I could. I don't know how
Exactly.
they can do that. I don't know how they can know that things are happening or do those things themselves that are harmful and look themselves in the mirror every day.
My cousin's best friend, her name is Dr. Wyatt. She's a phenomenal person. She's from New Orleans and she is an advocate. Dr. Wyatt is like you. She's a little pepper, but she always stands up for the kids. And a lot of people, they kind of, say that she gets the angry black woman. And they always,
Mhm.
she
Mhm.
actually lost a job. She was a principal. She
Oh, wow.
it's actually been years, and they pretty much have her to where she can't get anything done, and it's really sad. But it's glad to see, and I'm gonna definitely let her know about this interview because
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that there are other people out there that still have morals and are still about the kids and
Yeah.
not just about the money.
Yeah, I
Um,
had a situation once where I was working at a job, and keep in mind, this is mental health. We have a mandate to report child abuse and neglect. And I was told by a supervisor, you're not going to report that sexual abuse. And I'm like, oh, yes, I am. And and basically they said they were going to have a meeting. And what they did is they called me into the human resource department. And before my butt hit the seat, they handed me a check and said, you're done. And they, just like I'm a criminal, they have two people follow me to my office to get my stuff. And I said, is this because I followed the law and filed a child abuse report. And they said, well, you're just not a fit for this place. And so I went right over to DHHS, to the Department of basically Children, basically Child Protective Services, and I reported them for child abuse and neglect, and they got in a lot of trouble. But yeah, I mean, yes, it was horrible because suddenly I was without income as a single person, but it was like, you know what? I know I did the right thing. I
Yeah,
reported it and I helped those children.
that is so sad.
Yeah,
Man, that's
it's
so
horrible.
sad.
It's disgusting. It really is. Yeah.
Okay, so you said that you like to get your son Bryson's message out. What is Bryson's message to the world?
Bryson wanted everybody to know, especially kids that had a troubled past, kids in the foster care system, or just kids that felt like nobody loved them. He wanted everybody to know they had a golden core, and that golden core is basically perfect and good. And he wanted everybody to know, to just tune into that and know that you're a good person and that you have something perfect and beautiful and unique to offer to the world. And that was something he was actually writing a little manuscript called The Golden Core when he was younger. But what ended up happening, it was so painful to him because he didn't believe he had a golden core. And so it
Mm,
was very hard for him to finish it, but he has it, and I still have part of the manuscript, and it's beautiful. And he was giving me interviews before his death and that's Bryson on the cover. Before his death, he was giving me interviews for the book because he said he wanted, even though his story is painful, he says, Mom, you can always use any part of my story as long as it's to help other children, because he says, I don't want other kids to have to go through what I've gone through. And unfortunately, in the end, Bryson didn't believe that he was worth anything. And a lot of that had to do with when kids go through the foster care system, a lot of times the social workers will come with trash bags, and they will show up with trash bags and shovel all that child's belongings in and take them to the next foster home. And then when they're going to move them again, they come with another trash bag. And so these kids are taught to believe that they're trash. So Bryson wanted kids that believed that because they have behavioral issues, that maybe they believe that about themselves, that it's not true. And he, like all of the kids, have a golden core. I just wish that he saw it. But for any parent listening that has a living child, you still have hope.
thank you so much for that. That was big. I appreciate you so much. You don't know how I believe that this particular podcast episode is going to help so many people, because the issues that you spoke about, you can tell that you are deeply connected. And like I said, I have so much respect for you. Like, I can't wait to tell
Thank
my
you.
my Facebook friends about you, because we
Thank
always
you.
genuinely look for people that take up for the kids. Like, it's a clique of them. They don't mind taking up for kids, losing their jobs and everything else. But
Yeah,
some of us, we have learned to bite our tongues, and it hurts. It's hard to bite
yeah, it
to bite
does.
our tongues. I mean, I have this podcast, so I try to do things a little differently. But when I was fighting for my kids, it was so hard, the things that people would say. So, keeping jobs away, and I'm gonna make sure you
Yeah,
don't get hired. And
yeah, please.
like, I left city. I was in politics. I left politics because you can't say what you want to say, and
Exactly.
that wasn't the place for me, because I couldn't make it. And I can have, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about my imposter syndrome. I can be, I can get hired at almost any of the agencies inside the city, because I have a master's degree in public administration, in addition to all the years I have worked there. But I won't be able to get a job because I speak up when things are wrong. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a club, and it's really sad.
And I was going to say, yeah, you certainly don't bite your tongue by having a podcast like this. I mean, you're getting the information out that needs to. Sometimes we have to bite our tongues in certain situations because we know in that situation nothing good will come of it. And it's better to try to find a way to get your message through. There are certain people, like certain politicians, and for example, there's certain settings that I just know it's a waste of my time to try to get my voice through. So I try to find ways to get the information out, like through situations like these podcasts,
Yes.
and through the book. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I did a hybrid publishing deal with my second book, because I knew if I did a regular publishing deal, they were going to just slash the majority of my book. Anything controversial, just take it
Yes.
out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Man. Wow. Well, again, thank you so much, Laurie A. Couture. You
thank you,
have
Donna.
definitely been a blessing to me, and I know so many others. Thank you for all of the viewers who have watched and who have listened by way of podcast to this, and I'm glad you're still here. That means that you enjoyed everything. So, as always, remember to like, subscribe, share. If you have any comments or if you would like to say anything, make sure you leave a message and let me know. Did you learn something new? Especially about the medication, because people always bring that to me about kids and medication. So I hope you listened. And of course, you can rewind and go back. Do you want to share where they can purchase your books and follow you?
Sure. My best, quickest way to reach me is at my website, lauriecouture.com. Again, lauriecouture.com. I'm also on a lot of the social medias. I have a Patreon page. All of that's under Laurie A. Couture. My books can be purchased on Amazon or at barnesandnobles.com. And right now, even though the Nurturing and Empowering Our Sons, the full color edition, is set at $72 because it's such a big book. You can get it on Kindle for $9.99. So I always, I really wanted to make sure one of them, I don't set the prices, but I said I really want one version of it at least to be affordable for people.
Right. Okay. All right. I appreciate that. So I'm actually going to look into those books as well. I appreciate,
Yeah.
again, I can't say it
Thank
enough.
you.
I appreciate you. So if the Lord says the same, I will see you all next week. This particular one is going to run on Monday. We have like a mental health Monday. So this will come out on Monday, and I
Okay.
can't wait. Hopefully, I don't release it sooner because sometimes I just can't wait.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Like you're so excited. I know this has been very exciting. I'm so sorry to hear about the heartbreaking stories, and I hope your nephew and the other young man you mentioned, and also Tamika's daughter. Geez,
Yes.
I wonder if there's some way that there could be a campaign to get her out of there. I mean, it just is a terrible, terrible situation. And
It
no
is.
child should be in a jail. I remember the first time when I was being trained for juvenile justice, I had to use in a former youth detention center that was no longer being used. And I remember having to go downstairs to I was looking for the restroom, and I accidentally went the wrong way. And I first saw a child's jail, and it was like when I first saw a child shackled for the first time. I lost it. And normally I don't, you're trained not to cry in those settings. So I had to quickly get in the bathroom and, get myself put back together, because to
Man.
see a jail cell right now, I feel my skin crawl just thinking of seeing it. Very sad. I can't hear you. All of a sudden the audio went out. Yeah, you're muted. Yeah, for some reason I can't hear you. We might have to just email. Thank you. Thank you.